ready? Am I ready? Can you hear me? Can you hear the words coming out of my face? Well, I sure hope you can hear me. So, my friend is here. Very nice. You'll never know how much I really love you. You'll never know how much I really care. Do you want to know a secret? What's the background? It's not to tell. Whoa, whoa, closer. Wow. Can you hear it? Please tell me you can hear it. I'm in love with you. Ooh. Can you hear me, or am I looking like a fool over here? Mama T. Ooh, wow. Am I talking to myself, looking like a dang fool? Oh my gosh. Let me get the banner up. Can anybody hear me, or am I just talking to myself? Like I did this morning. Oh, good. Sounds good. Okay, great. Hi, everybody. My name is Deanna, but I go by Dee. And I am streaming out of Humboldt County, about Humboldt County to Humboldt County usually. But right now we're going to be doing our study. Woohoo! It's a good thing you're here, Mama T. You would be in trouble if you weren't. Annalisa, it's so good to see you guys. Now, remember, when I get started to read, which is going to be very, very soon, I cannot pay attention to the chat. I'm not going to interrupt the reading to give you my opinion. And so I have to essentially ignore the chat, but I want you guys to go ahead and talk and share anything you want to share. Even if you're not talking about the Constitution, it's okay. It's okay. Just let me do this reading. And for those of you that are part of the replay crew, you're awesome. And you guys that are here are awesome too. Of course, you know that. But please do keep our friend Bonnie in your prayers, who lost her daughter a couple weeks ago. Jen doesn't know I'm live. Well, let me surprise her with a special little link, right? Star called me earlier when I was live too. My really close super friends, they don't know I stream. Now Jen does. I met Jen streaming. You guys know Wisconsin Jen, that crazy lady that drove all the way out here from Wisconsin to California. That woman is crazy. God, I love her so much. So anyway, once I start, that's it. I'm not going to be able to pay attention to the chat. It's going to just be all about, this. And of course I dressed up because this is a big moment. We are commemorating learning our Constitution again. We're going through this book. You guys, I learned something this time too, that Dr. Skousen, who they don't call doctor in here, but I believe that he is a doctor. He also started the National Center for Constitutional Studies, and that is why they copywrote it the last two times. But he wrote this book. Dr. Skousen also wrote the it's so squeaky noisy, the 5,000 Year Leap book. This took 40 years to compile. This is an excellent book on American principles and really learning about our principles of freedom. There's 28, I believe. I should have that down, right? And, I try to say this a lot for your benefit. This is so good to learn and read these words, because even though you may not be getting, everything. And also, let me just say, things that I've heard about the Freemasons, I've heard about the Great Reset in 1776 rather. there's a lot of conspiracy theories, and I'm going to ask you to just set them all aside for the sake of we have this document still, and it helps people stay free today still. So that's why we're going to study it. Mama T, I have meant to check in with you for the last couple of weeks. I've been wanting to call you, and I'm sorry I haven't got back to you, especially since, the last time we spoke. I hope you're doing well. And again, reminder, once I start reading, I can't pay attention to chat, but you guys are welcome, and you may speak freely about anything you want to, because well, I don't usually have to delete these streams off of YouTube, but once in a while I do. Good to see you, Jen. So let me start off and share my screen. The pages are uploaded for you to be able to enjoy as well. And so, oh, I better do whole screen, because when I don't do the entire screen, then sometimes you don't get anything. You ain't gonna get nothing, and that would not be good. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate you all so much. I decided to make a blog about this stream as well to make it easy for anybody. Let's see. This is a couple of the things that I'm going to just go over. The pages today I'm reading. Let's go to them. I'm actually going to start in the middle of these two, but those are all the ones I'm going to be reading. I'm going to start with this one here. And it shows a sketch of some of our founding fathers, but this is it. This is the beginning. So God help my words. Help me to read well. They created the first free people to survive as a nation in modern times. They wrote a new kind of constitution, which is now the oldest in existence. They built a new kind of commonwealth designed as a model for the whole human race. They believed it was thoroughly possible to create a new kind of civilization, providing freedom, equality, and justice for all. They envisioned a vast commonwealth of freedom, which would encompass all North America and accommodate, as John Adams said, 200 to 300 million freemen. They created an expansive new cultural climate that gave eagle's wings to the human spirit. They encouraged exploration and technology to reveal the secrets of the universe. They built a free enterprise culture to promote millions of jobs and unprecedented prosperity. They invented for the world, as well as themselves, a whole new formula for happiness and success. They offered the human race a potential future filled with the ultimate hope of the human heart, a world of universal freedom, universal prosperity, and universal peace. So that is our introduction. Everybody good? Everybody good? Very good. Okay, here we go to the top. So this is the beginning. If you're just coming in now, welcome. This is the very first one of The Making of America, Chapter 1, and we're going to read the whole chapter, I think. I hope. Freedom, an idea whose time has come. This book is about the world's greatest political success formula. In a little over a century, this formula allowed a small segment of the human family, less than 6%, to become the richest industrial nation on earth. It allowed them to originate more than half of the world's total production and enjoy the highest standard of living in the history of the world. It also produced a very generous people. No nation in all recorded annals of the past has shared so much of its wealth with every other nation as has the United States of America. Even when it loaned money, it often forgave the debt. But Americans have much more to share than their wealth. They have the world's greatest political success formula to share. In this respect, they have been at fault. They have been too self-conscious about their system and its accomplishments. At times, they have been almost apologetic that they have had such a remarkable system when the rest of the world did not. The world needs to know this formula. It worked for Americans when they were an underdeveloped country. It will work for underdeveloped countries today. The three things all mankind is seeking. As we travel around the world in this modern jet age, we can vividly see that all mankind is seeking the same three things. First of all, mankind longs for freedom, both personally and nationally. Second, mankind longs for prosperity, both personally and nationally. Third, mankind longs for peace and the means of escaping from the apocalyptic anguish brought on by the plague of war. To achieve these three great human aspirations, the Constitution of the United States was written. It launched the ingenious Freedom Revolution 200 years ago and thereby provided the political and economic climate for 6 subsequent revolutions. 6 great revolutions which freedom made possible. First came the Industrial Revolution, which, through efficient factories, allowed mankind to begin to obtain the necessities of life in quantity. Second, we moved into the Machine Revolution, which gradually transferred the weary burden of the most arduous work from human and animal muscle to power to machine power. This began to make the necessities of life both abundant and cheap. Third, we entered the Transportation Revolution, which gradually changed the world into a much more closely related community of nations. Fourth, we developed the Communications Revolution, which changed the planet from a community of nations into a vast global neighborhood with instant new coverage telling us what is happening to our neighbors all over the world. Fifth, we entered the Energy Resource Revolution with fabulous underground lakes of oil and layers of fossil fuels. More recently, we have harnessed nuclear energy, which may turn out to be the safest, cheapest, and most abundant fuel of all. Cheap energy will allow the human standard of living to make a gigantic leap all over the world. Sixth, we reached the computer revolution where tiny chips of programmed electronic circuitry are able to store knowledge and record prior commands so as to make machines think and act. All 6 of these magnificent achievements can continue to thrive only in a climate of freedom. Nations which have recently lost their freedom have immediately experienced a catastrophic collapse, as every one of these advantages which were gained by these 6 revolutions has virtually disappeared into an oblivion of misery and bare subsistence survival. Freedom is the key. The Founders' Freedom Formula. The American Founding Fathers were students and philosophers as well as soldiers and politicians. They carefully scrutinized every system of government in existence to see which one was the most likely to make it possible for humanity to attain the 3 great goals of freedom, prosperity, and peace. But among all the political systems of the day, there was no such government. Around the globe, every government was structured to exploit its people, reduce them to poverty, and marshal their intimidated youth into predatory wars against nearby nations. No existing government was designed to provide its people with freedom, prosperity, and peace. Therefore, the founders sat down to invent one. One of those who verbalized the feelings of the founders at the time was Charles Pinckney of South Carolina, who asked, "Is there at this moment a nation upon earth that enjoys this right, where the true principles of representation are understood and practiced, and where all authority flows from and returns at stated periods to the people?" I answer, there is not. Then he asked what existing governments were based upon and said, "To fraud, to force, or accident, all the governments we know have owed their births." Finally, he marveled over the monumental undertaking the founders were striving to achieve. He said, "To the philosophical mind, how new and awful an instance do the United States at present exhibit in the political world. They exhibit, sir, the first instance of a people who, being dissatisfied with their government, unattacked by foreign force, and undisturbed by domestic uneasiness, coolly and deliberately resort to the virtue and good sense of their country for a correction of their public errors." As it turned out, the American formula was more like a restoration of what Jefferson called the ancient principles than an invention of something than an invention of something entirely new. Nevertheless, even after the founders had discovered these principles, it still required the utmost ingenuity at the Constitutional Convention to fit them into the requirements of a modern society. In this book, we are going to tell the founding fathers' story. Much of it is told in the words of the founders, in the words of the founders themselves. Our purpose is to explain their unique perspective on vital issues and then provide rather extensive passages from their own writings. The reader can then feel the power of their minds sweeping away centuries of bad government and bad laws to formulate a whole new structure of society based on those ancient principles of human freedom. The founders' view of human nature. The founders were optimistic as well as realistic about human nature. They realized that all human beings are a mixture of sunshine and shadow. The sunshine consists of the perfectibility of human reason. This makes government and civilization possible. The darker side of human nature is the imperfectibility of human passion and man's faulty sense of judgment that make government necessary. As James Madison stated, as there is a degree of depravity in mankind which requires a certain degree of circumspection and distrust, so there are other qualities in human nature which justify a certain portion of esteem and confidence. The founders' goal was to revive the ancient principles which would allow the sunshine side of human nature to enjoy virtually unlimited freedom while setting up appropriate safeguards to prevent the doleful shadow of human passion, greed, and lust for power from spreading a permanent dark ages across the face of the globe. As Clinton Rossiter wrote, there is no happiness without liberty, no liberty without self-government, no self-government without constitutionalism, no constitutionalism without morality, and none of these great goods without stability and order. The miracle of America. It is truly astonishing that after several thousand years of human experimentation with various forms of government and economics, the American Charter of Liberty turned out to be the first successful attempt to build a whole civilization on the principles of freedom. Right. Did I just, yeah. Americans, as a result, became the first free people in modern times. Several of those who had the honor of being called American founders and who spent their lives and fortunes hammering out the practical aspects of a system of freedom under law called the final version of the United States Constitution a miracle. In a letter to the Marquis de Lafayette on February 7, 1788, George Washington wrote, "It appears to me then little short of a miracle that the delegates from so many different states, which states you know are also different from each other in their manners, circumstances, and prejudices, should unite in forming a system of national government." James Madison wrote to Thomas Jefferson in France on December 9th, 1787, saying it was impossible to consider the degree of concord which ultimately prevailed as less than a miracle. But what was this miracle system of government and economics? And why did it take so many centuries for scholars and political leaders to come up with a success formula based on freedom? The founders themselves said that it could not have been achieved without a number of highly favorable circumstances. These circumstances combined to provide the cultural environment which virtually compelled them to take this dangerous and exciting new leap into the unknown. The miracle required a certain amount of isolation, a more or less homogeneous population, a common language, a common set of basic beliefs, a universal sense of urgency because of a common threat, and a generous sprinkling of remarkable leaders in each of the regions who were willing to meet together and strive for a common goal. The presence of all of these ingredients is part of the miracle which became America. The cultural soil in which American freedom grew. The founders and many of their contemporaries seem to have recognized the unique and propitious set of circumstances which had been gradually thrust upon them. Their paramount ambition, therefore, developed into a surging anxiety to somehow seize this opportunity for the creation of a free society before it slipped from their grasp. As we shall see in this book, it almost escaped them. John Jay, the first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, commented on the singular good fortune of the Americans as they undertook the task of establishing a great free nation. He wrote, America was not composed of detached and distant territories, but one connected, fertile, wide-spreading country was the portion of our western sons of liberty. Providence has in a particular manner blessed it with a variety of soils and innumerable streams for the delight and accommodation of its inhabitants. I have often taken notice that Providence has been pleased to give this one connected country to one united people, a people descended from the same ancestors, speaking the same language, professing the same religion, attached to the same principles of government, very similar in their manners and customs, and who, by their joint counsels, arms, and efforts, fighting side by side throughout a long and bloody war, have nobly established their general liberty and independence. The founders held a long-range view of the future. The founders believed that their Commonwealth of Freedom would eventually encompass the entire North American continent, and they held to this view in spite of the claims of England, Russia, France, and Spain to parts of this territory. The American leaders were deeply disappointed when the 4 French colonies in Canada declined to join the 13 states under the Articles of Confederation. Nevertheless, they frequently expressed their complete confidence that new states would be added until their union extended from the Atlantic seaboard to the shores of the Pacific. As far as population was concerned, the founders predicted that within a century the land would be occupied by at least 50 million people. John Adams declared that he was quite certain that one day the great American empire would boast a population of between 200 and 300 million free men. The Constitution was designed to accommodate changing times. As we shall see from the founders' own writings, the Constitution was intended to be strictly interpreted exactly as it is written. They knew that in its original form it would adapt itself very readily to the needs of changing times. It was specifically designed to disperse political power among the people and protect the freedom of the individual by putting chains on the excessive ambitions and frailties of human nature, which is always the same from generation to generation. They knew we would need these constitutional chains in our present industrial age just as much as they did in their own agrarian age of farming and horticulture. In other words, the founders saw the Constitution as a perpetual charter of human liberty that would never become obsolete. To prevent any politician from shattering the chains of the Constitution and thereby destroying its systems of checks and balances, the founders urged their successors and descendants to never allow the Constitution to be changed by usurpation or twisted interpretation. It was to be changed only by carefully adopted amendments. The amendment process was designed to permit a full-scale public discussion of any proposed changes. It is impressive to discover how many proposed amendments of the past that looked so highly desirable when first presented were rejected completely after being carefully scrutinized during the amendment process. Pioneering freedom for the whole human race. Throughout the writings of the Founding Fathers, there are numerous references to their commitment to build a new civilization, a civilization which would not only provide peace and prosperity for themselves, but would become a model for the rest of mankind. Even before the Declaration of Independence was written, John Adams saw the blossoming of human hope, which was beginning to flower in America, and wrote, I always consider the settlement of America with reverence and wonder as the opening of a grand scene and design in Providence for the illumination of the ignorant and the emancipation of the slavish part of mankind all over the earth. In the same spirit, James Madison wrote, "Happily for Americans, happily we trust, for the whole human race, all caps, they, the founders, pursued a new and more noble cause." The outreaching mind of Thomas Jefferson, which continually surveyed the world in search of principles which would enhance the welfare of all mankind, had this to say in a letter to one of his friends: "A just and solid republican government maintained here will be a standing monument and example for the aim and imitation of the people of other countries. And I join with you in the hope and belief that our revolution and its consequences will ameliorate the condition of man over a great portion of the globe. What a satisfaction have we in the contemplation of the benevolent effects of our efforts, compared with those of the leaders of the other side, who have countenanced all advances in science as dangerous innovations, have endeavored to render philosophy and republicanism terms of reproach, to persuade us that men cannot be governed but by the rod." The founder's sense of mission. As John Jay pointed out, the American people had been literally thrust into an amazing accumulation of fortunate circumstances which obligated them to determine whether or not a body of approximately 3 million human beings could deliberately and by calculated design organize themselves into a free nation. The possibility of immediate and tangible success gave that whole generation a feeling of obligation and a sense of mission which they felt compelled to fulfill as pioneers on the frontiers of political science and prosperity economics. They called it their manifest destiny. The spirit of dedication to the welfare of all humanity, not just themselves, is reflected in passages such as this one from John Adams, who described the entire process of nation building as a divine science. He wrote, "The science of government is my duty to study more than all other sciences. The arts of legislation and administration and negotiation ought to take place of, indeed, exclude in a manner all other arts. I must study politics and war, that my sons may have liberty to study mathematics and philosophy. My sons ought to study mathematics and philosophy, geography, natural history, naval architecture, navigation, commerce, and agriculture, in order to give their children a right to study painting, poetry, music, architecture, statuary, tapestry, and porcelain." Thomas Jefferson's sense of mission is equally prominent throughout his writings. For example, "We owed every other sacrifice to ourselves, to our federal brethren, and all caps here, and to the world at large, to pursue with temper and perseverance the great experiment which shall prove that man is capable of living in society, governing itself by laws self-imposed, and securing to its members the enjoyment of life, liberty, property, and peace, and further to show that even when the government of its choice shall manifest a tendency to degeneracy, we are not at once to despair, but that the will and the watchfulness of its sounder parts will reform its aberrations, recall to it original and legitimate principles, and restrain it within the rightful limits of self-government. America becomes the hope of the world. Even before the American Commonwealth of Freedom had been established, people of all classes and all nationalities were beginning to anticipate great possibilities in the future development of something new and exciting in America. America seemed to breathe a spirit of hope into the minds of the restless and oppressed people in Europe. It had such a stimulating effect on the English that before long 1 out of every 4 Englishmen was living in America. There was even mention in some circles that the capital of British Empire should be moved to America. Yeah, I'll bet. Probably no European saw greater hope for humanity in the American experiment than the French judge and political writer Alexis de Tocqueville, who had spent nearly 2 years in the United States. After the French Revolution of 1848, he urged his fellow countrymen to look to America if they wanted to find the formula for the best government on earth. He said, for 60 years, the American people have increased in opulence, and consider it well. It is found to have been, during that period, not only the most prosperous, but the most stable of all nations of the earth. Where else could we find greater causes of hope or more instructive lessons? Let us look to America, not in order to make a servile copy of the institutions that she has established, but to gain a clearer view of the polity that will be the best for us. The laws of the French Republic may be, and ought to be, in many cases, different from those which govern the United States. But the principles on which the American constitutions rest, those principles of order, of the balance of powers, of true liberty, of lost my place. I'm sorry. Of deep and sincere respect for right are indispensable to all republics. As the leaders of other countries studied the principles of the United States Constitution, there was widespread acclaim for this upward leap in good government and sound economics. The great leader in Parliament, William Pitt, exclaimed, "It will be the wonder of admiration of all future generations and the model of all future constitutions." The Prime Minister of England, William E. Gladstone, later said, "It is the greatest piece of work ever struck off at a given time by the brain and purpose of man." The first Prime Minister of Canada, Sir John A. Macdonald, said, "I think and believe that it is one of the most perfect organizations that ever governed a free people." Responsibility of the people under the American system. It was a basic principle of the American experiment that it was to be a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. The corollary to this primary principle was the obvious barb that this American-type government would not function efficiently and perhaps might not even survive if the people did not maintain a constant vigilance and thereby develop what Jefferson called an intelligent and informed electorate. It was customary in some of the early state legislatures to have powerful spokesmen of the day come before the representatives of the people at one of their early sessions and remind them of the importance of the lawmaking process. An eloquent example of this kind of dissertation is found in speech by patriot Samuel Langdon before the Massachusetts legislature in 1788. He declared, "On the people, therefore, of these United States, it depends whether wise men or fools, good or bad men, shall govern. Therefore, I will now lift up my voice and cry aloud to the people. From year to year, be careful in the choice of your representatives and the higher powers, offices of government. Fix your eyes upon men of good understanding and known honesty, men of knowledge improved by experience, men who fear God and hate covetousness, who love truth and righteousness and sincerely wish for the public welfare. Let not men openly irreligious and immoral become your legislators. If the legislative body are corrupt, you will soon have bad men for counselors, corrupt judges, unqualified justices, and officers in every department who will dishonor their stations. Never give countenance to turbulent men who wish to distinguish themselves and rise to power by forming combinations and inciting insurrections against government. I call upon you also to support schools in your towns. It is a debt you owe to your children." American institutions founded on widespread basic beliefs. One of the most amazing aspects of the American story is that while the nation's founders came from widely divergent backgrounds, their fundamental beliefs were virtually identical. They quarreled bitterly over the most practical plan of implementing those beliefs, but rarely, if ever, disputed about their final objections or basic convictions. Oh, there it is. These men came from several different churches and some from no churches at all. They ranged in occupation from farmers to presidents of universities. Their social background included everything from wilderness pioneering to the aristocracy of landed estates. Aristocracy, however you say it. Their dialects included everything from the loquacious drawl of South Carolina to the clipped staccato of Yankee New England. Their economic origins included everything from frontier poverty to opulent wealth. Then how do we explain their remarkable unanimity in fundamental beliefs? Perhaps the explanation will be found in the fact that they were all remarkably well read and mostly from the same books. Although the level of their formal training varied from spasmodic doses of home tutoring to the rigorous regimen of Harvard's classical studies, the debates in the Constitutional Convention and the writings of the founders reflect a far broader knowledge of religious, political, historical, economical, and philosophical studies than would be found in any cross section of American leaders today. The thinking of Polybius, Cicero, Thomas Hooker, Sir Edward Coke, Baron Charles de Montesquieu, Sir William Blackstone, John Locke, and Adam Smith salt and peppered their writings and their conversations. They were also careful students of the Bible, especially the Old Testament, and even though some were not active in any Christian denomination, the teachings of Jesus were held in universal respect and admiration by them. Their readings also included a broad perspective of Greek, Roman, Anglo-Saxon, European, and English history. Nothing is more remarkable about the early American leaders than this breadth of reading and depth of knowledge concerning the essential elements of sound nation building. The relative uniformity of fundamental thought shared by these men included strong and unusually well-defined convictions concerning religious principles, political precepts, economic fundamentals, and long-range social goals. On particulars, of course, they quarreled, but when discussing fundamental precepts and ultimate objectives, they seemed practically unanimous. They even had strong criticisms of one another as individual personalities, yet admired each other as laborers in the common cause. John Adams, for example, felt strong personality conflicts between himself and Benjamin Franklin and even Thomas Jefferson. Yet Adams' writings are steeped in accolades for both of them, and their writings carried the same for him. One of George Washington's most vehement critics was Dr. Benjamin Rush, and yet that Pennsylvania physician boldly supported everything for which Washington worked and fought. Why is it important to study the founder's success formula today? The American people are now 2 centuries away from the nation's original launching. Our ship of state is far out to sea and is being tossed about in stormy waters, which the founders felt could have been avoided if we had stayed within sight of our initial moorings. They also felt that each ingredient set forth in their great success formula was of the highest value. They would no doubt be alarmed to see how many of those ingredients have been abandoned or have been allowed to become seriously eroded. Nevertheless, an important lesson of life is that even prodigality may be useful in its way. At least it can serve to satisfy in the future our curiosity concerning forbidden pathways. In the past 2 centuries, the American heritage has been subjected to a long list of experimental explorations into non-constitutional detours. Our consistent disappointment and fading expectations could be a valuable legacy of warning to the next generation. The immediate task, of course, is to learn about the Constitution ourselves. Most Americans of this generation must confess that they have never taken the time from their busy lives to pursue the founders' exciting historical pilgrimage in search of those ancient principles. Nevertheless, it is an amazing grimmage and search. Oh, wait, sorry. It is amazing and gratifying adventure. It makes the student begin to recapture the original vision of the founders when they assured the world that these principles would provide the freedom, prosperity, and peace that mankind is seeking. Freedom is America's greatest export. In the immediate future, carefully trained Americans should commence exporting the founders' great success formula. The world is waiting for it. We are living in a fantastic age when scientists are developing the technology to mine for minerals on the moon and build satellite islands in space. A commercial transport is already being planned, which can go 60 miles above the earth and deliver passengers from Los Angeles to New York in 12 minutes. It will circumvent the globe in an hour and 30 minutes. It will make every flying machine of our day virtually obsolete. This was okay. But all of this exciting progress in scientific technology is accompanied by a growing sense of urgency to provide a blueprint for advanced civilization capable of living in this great new era. Obviously, the leap in modern technology is a thrilling adventure, but the fact remains that if the human race gets too far away from its basic spiritual and cultural moorings, that promised era of the future could end up in a crematorial holocaust of flame and fury. So this book is vital for those who wish to catch the founder's vision of human achievement in a great new age, which we call the 8th step. The founders took us up to the 7th step, but we have since slipped off our pedestal slightly. We must regain our footing, re-examine our game plan, and then begin exporting our formula for freedom, prosperity, and peace to the rest of the world. It is fundamental to the progress, happiness, and self-realization of all mankind. It is what the founders expected of us. It may turn out to be the key for the survival of the human family on the planet Earth. Dun, dun, dun. And that is your first chapter. Ta-da! 41 minutes. Not too bad. Not too bad, huh? 41 minutes. Whew, I'm more out. I don't think I could take much more, really. I think my throat would have been like, okay, you have been talking for 35 minutes nonstop. It's time for you to shut up. That's a long time. How are you guys? Good to see y'all. Good to see y'all. I'm not sure about that. I don't know that I'm going to have an hour today. But it's good to see you all. I can call you. I'm going to call you, but no, I don't know about that. Well, I really appreciate you guys. And a lot of you, most of you watch afterwards and aren't even here. And, I'm going to tell you one more time. The reason why I don't just do video uploads is because when I'm using StreamYard and I'm able to set this up, I'm able to set this up on Rumble and Twitch and YouTube at the same time. And then it just goes out at the same time, which is why people do premieres, I think, though, because they're probably able to do that. That's why it runs live, but it's really a recording. That's my guess. That's what I think premieres are. But I'm not really sure. What is today? Wednesday? Yeah. Well, I'll have to call you back, Jen and Mama T. Thank you very much for being here. I appreciate you guys. I do want to, now that I've gotten these two streams out of the way, like my humble check-in stream and the Constitution class, I'm going to be streaming with Ricky and Vex soon. Ricky is Four Corners Report. And but I told them, I got to get some of this stuff out first, especially the class. So anyway, I feel like that's going to come about. So watch for me because I'll be back. Love you guys. See you on the next one.